Hey. Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good afternoon. It's 12. After 12.
Hi, Christine. How are you?
I am fine. You're living in a good world. You're still in morning.
Yes, good afternoon. Sorry.
And I hear morning. I say, hold on now. They're in a different time zone.
Right.
It's afternoon. All right.
Some of us still in bed, so.
What?
That's my best quiet place.
I have been up from 5 a.m.
I was awake. I'm still in bed.
Once I'm awake, I cannot stay in. I have to get up.
Oh, you're a busybody. I'm not.
And today it's not cold. It's not hot. So it's the day.
Yeah, it is.
Not 90 degrees and it's not 60 degrees. It's 82. So you'll sweat, but you'll be all right. All right. Mr. Gelsey, start at 12:15 promptly.
All right, let's go.
Okay, so let's go. So we stopped last week near to the end of shareholders and talking about capital. So I want to finish shareholders and then go into directors and officers, and then I'm going to send you all some homework, which is not mandatory, remember. Okay? So I don't know which page this is. Let me see.
So, Ms. Archer, just one question.
Go ahead.
I may have missed it because I just signed in, but so the homework that was, and I saw your note, the homework that would have been, ought to have been submitted for today, that's been pushed to next week, right?
Yeah, because I didn't send the questions. Because I didn't chapter, correct.
So we're having double homework this week. The one you're going to assign now, and then the one we had should have had last week.
Yes.
I will beg for leniency.
Okay, so let me do it this way then. I can send you the one for last week, for this week, and then the one for Unit 7, which is directors. I will send that the following week. How about that?
I would love that, but I know we have some sharpshooters in here who may want to do both, but I would love that bit of leniency.
I can do it that way because don't forget now you also have the midterm to do.
That's right. So that's
I was just gonna say we have a midterm as well.
Yeah. So
and I was checking every day all week. I was like, I don't see it. So that was my excuse. If there was homework due, I didn't see it.
I intentionally send because that's at the end I said we didn't finish, so I'm not going to send it.
Okay, so we will allow for this week's to be submitted in next week, and then we'll push the directors out a little bit further.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
All right.
Okay, let me see. All right. Welcome, Kadrin. I see Kadrin just came on. And Sandy.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And this is running a little late.
Oh, okay. She just joined in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to start with the section that talks about definition and types of shareholders. My page doesn't have any numbers, so I can't tell you which page that is. Right after transmission of shares. Let me know when you're on the page.
Give me a search word, please.
Types of shareholders.
Okay, hi.
Found it? Or it may be easy if you can nominate.
Yeah, I found it. It's page 110 in the PDF file.
Okay. All right, so you know from last class, there are different types of shareholders. You have common shareholders, you have preference shareholders, and of course, shareholders can be in different classes. And the different classes give them different rights and priority in terms of dividends. You also have the terms used majority shareholder or minority shareholder. And of course, you've heard about nominee shareholders. So those who are in the world of financial corporate service providers, I'm sure they're well aware of nominee shareholders and of course the nominee directors. So what's a nominee shareholder? And what is all of this financial corporate service provider? The act itself and the services are provided by these companies. So under the Financial Corporate Service and Providers Act, you have a company that carries out certain activities. One, it provides services as registered agent, registered office, and it also can provide other services, such as preparing all of the draft documents for registration at the registrar, ensuring that the company always maintains its regulatory and statutory requirements under the Act, either the IBC Act or under the Companies Act. But now we're going to talk about nominee shareholders. And a nominee shareholder is an agency relationship that is drafted in an agreement where the company itself acts as the shareholder in place of the actual ultimate beneficial owner. This is the reason why there is a lot of pressure on the Bahamas and jurisdictions like the Bahamas who have nominee shareholders and nominee directors. The G10, G12 countries want to be able to conduct a research and find out who is the ultimate BO. They're not interested in nominee shareholding. Even though the whole prospect of having that feature is for anonymity and convenience, what the G10 and G12 is looking for is that we must have transparency and not go behind the shield of this nominee arrangement. So whenever you offer nominee or nominee services on behalf of the ultimate, one of the key things you have to remember is that they follow a strict KYC policy. And some companies that offer it and under the FCSP who offer the service normally only do it for clients whom they are familiar and know very well because of the risks that are involved. Because you're not involved in the day-to-day transactions that are carried out by these companies. You follow instructions, which means that if they're in the middle of an arrangement or in the middle of a transaction, they may have a due diligence requirement and they need a character reference, or they may need a certificate of incumbency. But in terms of you actually carrying out that transaction and knowing what that transaction involved, in most instances, you're not involved in that. You may sign off in your capacity, but you're not involved in the day-to-day transaction. And that is why you have to follow strict KYC, strict due diligence, and you have to make sure that there's no offense of money laundering or financing of terrorism. And it's an onerous task on the FCSP to ensure that these things do not occur. So like I said, that nominee shareholder arrangement is an agency relationship. And the nominee shareholder holds those shares in its own name. And it does this on behalf of the ultimate beneficial owner. The nominee shareholder acts as an agent on behalf of the ultimate beneficial owner. So as the agent, the nominee shareholder owes the same duties and responsibilities to the ultimate beneficial owner as an agent owes the principal. So what are they expected to do? They're expected to perform the duties that are imposed on them by the terms, be it express or implied, in the agency agreement. The nominee agreement between the ultimate BO and the nominee shareholder, and they have to act strictly within the terms of that nominee arrangement. In consideration of the agency arrangement, the duties and obligations inherent in such a relationship, the potential liability that a nominee shareholder would incur would be primarily one towards the ultimate beneficial owner of the shares for breach of warranty of authority. So if the nominee shareholder exceeds his actual or apparent authority to act on the principal's behalf in any way. The principal, of course, can ratify any acts of the agent if they so desire, and it is important that the provisions of the nominee arrangement between the ultimate beneficial owner and the nominee shareholder states clearly and comprehensively the nature and ambit of the nominee shareholder relationship, the duties and the responsibilities of the nominee shareholder, and the extent of the authority of the nominee shareholder to act on behalf of the ultimate beneficial owner in that capacity. Now, if you look at third parties, the nominee shareholder has the same liability as an ordinary shareholder. So which is liability for any amount that remains unpaid on shares issued to him in a company limited by shares. It's normally thought that this whole nominee shareholder relationship is a legal fiction, since a nominee shareholder has no real or practical liability. Any legal obligation or liability with regard to the shareholding remains the obligation of the actual ultimate beneficial owner. And it's not that of the agent or its representative. And like I said before, very strict KYC is required. And the AML policy for a financial corporate service provider has to ensure that they verify the client information and they distinguish exclusively the nature and ambit of the client's business dealings before the services are offered to the client. A financial corporate service provider may wish to provide only, like I said before, to clients they actually know. That means you not only know the clients individually, but you also know the nature of their business. And that helps.
Question. Do you see or foresee any real future for the offshore jurisdictions who formerly, and I say formally before the introduction of the boss register and all these other things, where the ultimate beneficiary actually need to be known? Do you see any real future for us? I mean, what is that really that we're doing? Because like, we still have to disclose all this information.
Well, we're trying to be the last man standing. That's how I put it. When I listen to a lot of the webinars that they're having from the G10, G12 countries, they are still pushing ahead with their agenda. Remember now, these countries, especially if another war comes, it's going to be even worse. But these countries are, you remember the Pandora Papers?
No.
In Panama? When they were able to...
I'll have to Google that.
You don't remember that? They were able to find out who owned a lot of these IBCs in Panama and connected them to the oligarchy or to royalty or to businessmen who were not paying their taxes. But that whole pressure has not stopped. Because even just as recently as, let me see, December of last year, the EU is now pushing to target all shell companies that were in that whole release from Panama. Even though Panama has pushed back and said it is not an offshore jurisdiction, do not class it with the Bahamas and Cayman and Malta and Seychelles. The EU is not listening to that. They're saying a lot of our citizens have companies in your jurisdiction And those are linked to other companies and other offshore jurisdictions. And so their target now is to go after those companies. So fight as much as we can. We found a way right now to still stand, but they're now going even further. And so if you have a company here in the Bahamas, and that company has another company within the group that's in Panama, eventually they will all be linked. Because that's what the Panama Papers was all about. Taking a company in Panama, linking it to a company in the Bahamas, from the Bahamas to Seychelles, from Seychelles to Malta, and then identifying who's the ultimate beneficial owner. And then the EU countries track to see if they've actually paid taxes from the income from all of those companies, or where they just use as pass-through. So it is something that I would say is a matter of time. We have to find a different model, and that's what we should be trying to do now.
Yeah.
The time to find that model is to do it now, so that all those who have been exposed will now come to the Bahamas, because eventually those people are going to be left with nowhere to go. And so what will they do? They withdraw their funds and they take it home. And then our financial sector will be practically gone. But that time is now. You could only push back for so far and for so long. So that's thoughts to think about as to what can we come up with to attract people to the Bahamas, and how can we deal with this pressure from the EU? Any thoughts? No thoughts?
It just seems like there's doom and gloom everywhere. Like our financial services will eventually be gone and we'll all be farmers and fishers.
I think from my perspective, the Bahamas needs to be bolder in terms of themselves pushing back or ourselves pushing back. I don't know if it'll be too little too late, but I think we would have fallen too far under the pressures of the G20s. And we should have taken the approach that some of the other, I mean, it's a bit too late now to even determine this, but we should have come up at the time when we had an opportunity to, when this was initially being passed to us, to clarify some of the things that we were doing, and not to so much accede to all of the demands that were being placed. Because I mean, I don't think that we were doing anything that the US, is not currently doing, and many of the other larger countries. And I think that, we have professionals in the Bahamas who are serious about compliance and due diligence, and I don't know that we're being taken at our word. So it's just a lot that we could have done earlier to resist some of the things that are being put on us, and in my estimation, things that we, certain burdens that we ought not to have been bearing, because I don't know that that the Bahamas has been acting contrary to any of the other nations that are themselves considered as offshore nations.
Yeah, so I agree with Yvette, because I think currently we comply with more regulations than the US.
Right.
So I was hold on before you finish, because I may forget this thought. The point you just made about the US. don't forget now the US stands as, well, I guess they're the number one between them and China, fighting between the number one, number two nations in the world. When it comes to KYC, the United States requires only a passport. That's it. Nothing else.
Right.
Exactly. They don't, but because they're more greater than us,
Yes.
yeah.
Size and power.
Yes.
Just a dot. And so whenever they say, you now have to jump, not through this little small circle, but through this big hoop, we have to try and see if we can do it. Otherwise, they can shut us down.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like even though the Bahamas is small, the way we're situated, like it could be very powerful at the same time. Like the United States, we have such a investment within our country because they know the way we're situated, it could affect I could even make an effect on their country if some other country comes there.
Yes.
But
yeah, I would agree. Proximity to the, I mean, like the same, that, you know, it's like walking a tightrope. You can, if you're good enough, you can cross it, but one wobble and you will fall and die.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's what we're doing, and that's what we would have to do if we make a bold stance. Yeah. We would be walking on a tightrope, and if we wobble, you know, make the wrong move, relying on, let's say, another great nation to come in and swoop us up and be the all-powerful to us if we, you know, refuse to comply with certain things. Mm-hmm. We don't know that that's how it's going to play out. So you have to be very careful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but do what though? I mean, proximity is one thing, but if you close down the financial sector, I mean, and okay, you allow China to come in and whatever, what do you do in terms of employment?
I don't know, but we have competition in the Bahamas. You know, you have the US, you have the Chinese, and now you have the Middle East.
Yeah, like right now, the US embassy, they're moving their location because the Chinese built the point across from the embassy. So like they're having their own little war right here in Nassau.
Yes, they are. They are. And then the Chinese wanted to buy Columbus House, where the new embassy is going.
Exactly. They're having like a whole
right. It's a whole right. So you don't look at things when you see them happening, thinking it's just the financial sector.
Right.
This where we are right now is in the Bahamas, as it always has been. When you read historically, we're in a very strategic position.
Absolutely.
And
on the trade route as well, we're a key component on the trade route.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the stop in and out of the
back in prohibition and all those other stuff. The way we're situated and all the little cubby holes we have in the islands and the reefs and stuff like that.
It's perfect for any kind of business. And now we're going to be, I would say in the next 2 years, we're going to be in a tug of war from these three big countries fighting over who's going to be controlling this small little archipelago thingam of islands.
Archipelago.
You could hear the rumblings. You gotta listen. When you read the newspaper, but use your intelligence at the same time. The papers only report a little bit of something to get things moving, but something is undercurrent, and it is happening.
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's happening.
I think too, though, the long and the short is we have to. I think you were trying to bring it out last week. We have to trust each other in terms of our abilities, what we could bring to the table. We need to stop relying always on, foreign investment is important, but we also need to work more collaboratively with each other to try to accomplish more. And Bahamians are smart and talented people, but we just don't really always trust each other's instinct or ability. We'd rather go abroad to do this and that. We'd rather go to a larger conglomerate to get this service or that service done. We don't really trust each other in terms of putting the value proposition, that I know I can get something good from my brother or my sister And I think we need to move away from that thought process.
Because if we don't, we're going to die. We're going to become the minority. And they're going to take over. And I don't care how much you scream and shout about it. I can see it coming. We are going to be in the minority.
Yeah.
Even at the way in which our food is prepared now.
It sounds like a nice podcast to subscribe to.
I know, right?
See, I'm giving you all ideas. No, I'm serious. If you don't try to maintain your heritage, you're going to lose it. I'll be long gone, but I don't think people would even know what is Bahamian.
Right.
But Ms. Archer, we've been saying that for decades. I mean, I know, I agree with you 100%. And I'm sure everyone in the group does. But we've been saying that for decades and decades, and I'm old enough to be able to say that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it's going to take. I mean, we just keep saying it.
But in one instance, it requires money, and those that have money, to me, are only investing for their own self-interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Please tell me what world do we need to buy oil from Saudi Arabia? What are we using oil for? What? What? Is it that the oil is coming through us now? This is a pipeline going through here to go somewhere else? Because I don't see how much oil can we consume that we need there. And in this modern technology, all the other G10 countries, they're moving away from using oil. So
that's right.
Going electric.
Yeah, so to tell me,
you can go on Gladstone Road and buy electric car now if you want.
Yes, but I don't understand the logic behind it. But again, I'm telling you, things are in the papers. They're in for a reason, and they just give you a little smear, but you really don't know what's happening behind it. And if we as Bahamians don't stand up and start to speak, I don't think there'll be anything left. Something is going on, and it's just ain't normal. And we are being pushed out. But I think we're too laid back.
I also think that all of this that you're saying, and whoever said we were talking about this for decades now, they're old enough to know. I'm old enough to know too. Yes, we have. The mindset is something that needs to be worked on. You know, we have entities that can assist with this. I think Bahamas Chamber of Commerce needs to be more present. You know, there's so much that we can do to move the ball along. But yes, complacency is one that you know, that is a very harmful thing that we do. But we do have the ability to move forward. We have like I said, Chamber of Commerce, the nonprofit association. There's so many ways in which we can make our voices heard and also put in the physical work, but we just don't seem to have the impetus to do it. No. And we cannot be waiting on politicians to do it either. I mean, I'm going to come off my soapbox though, so. Yeah.
And to your point, Yvette, I think one of the things we lack is tenacity. Like if we don't see our results right away, like we have a lot of people who move towards what we're talking about. You know, they try to create movements to affect what we're talking about right now. But if we don't see the results immediately, it's like it just falls away, and you know, we move on to the next thing. And yeah,
they have to quick. They need money now, plenty of money now. They didn't for the long haul. That's too long.
And change. I mean, you have to be tenacious about change. Whatever that change is you want. If you're saying it's to better, you know, our country, our society, we have to be dogged and tenacious. But yeah, we don't have that kind of drive, I suppose. So not enough of us. Let me say. I don't want to generalize, but.
So if you look at what we're talking about now, right? Financial corporate service providers and providing this nominee service and other services. People who are in this business is just sitting there and praying, oh, well, the ministers will deal with it.
Yeah.
We'll wait and see. You can't wait for them. You need to come up with some ideas, because the day is going to come when they say, oh, hold on, we have to shut the whole thing down. Because what's going to be left is just a little skeleton, a little few of them offering the services to a few people. Because when these countries put the hammer down and tell these people, bring your money home, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to bring their money home. And you have to be careful of the money that is circulating now. Because after all of this tax amnesty around the world, who you think is moving money now? It ain't legitimate people. People who are not able to put their monies in banks a long time ago, while all of this fuss was going around, a lot of exposures going around, they now need to put their money in banks because they have to clean it. This world don't run on legitimate money only.
That's for sure.
So it's a vicious world, and we have to be so careful. We're sitting in, to me, I keep saying, when I travel around the world and I hear people talk about us, and if they look on a map, I say to myself, these islands are paradise. People die to come here. They want to come here. They think there's magic here. And we just don't realize it. This is a gold mine. It's not about sun, and sea.
I realize it.
It's a strategic location.
I think that's what Bahamians don't have enough of an appreciation for, the gold mine that we do have. And I think I agree with a whole lot of what everyone have said already, that we're probably a little bit lackadaisical than we should be, I think, and we look for someone else to do the things. Also, I don't think that we share enough of the wealth around for each other, because some persons are benefiting, but it just doesn't reach the masses.
No, right. I agree with you. That's selfishness. That's being very selfish.
If you look at the Chinese and you look at other nationalities, they help each other. Chinese very seldom buy from anyone else other than Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
The persons from Dubai and those other Middle Eastern countries, they support each other's businesses. I don't think that we as Bahamians support each other enough.
No, we don't. No, because then that comes that same small-mindedness. Now, why am I going to buy from you when you become a millionaire and you'll move from out the Grove and you're going to go down by Life for Key? Ain't happen. Not you. That's the way they think.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that on entirely. I know that persons from the islands, they are very clannish. They come to Nassau and they stay amongst themselves. They help each other out. And the Nassauvians may be a little bit kind of like selfish. But the islanders are different.
Yeah, I meant the Nassauvians, not the island. No,
yeah.
Those are different.
Okay, thank you. I'm from Eleuthera.
And Nassauvians are mixed with all different types of cultures.
I'm from Eleuthera as well.
Yeah. So they normally stick together and they support, because I know when I visit out islands, they'll say, now you got to go by Auntie Carol place. She has this. And you go by this one place. And there's nowhere else for you to go anyhow.
Yeah.
So, but like you say, it is clannish. You want bread, they tell you where to go. You want this is where you go. This is where you get this. But it's like I said at the beginning of the class, and like you just finished saying just now, the whole class, you have to look at the Chinese and see how they are taking over. Every little small shop that used to be run by local people, they're all dead now. They're run by the Chinese.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. I made an observation. This is a specific sector of business. One time ago, they're very strategic, of course, and you can't fault them, but they used to concentrate on very cheap food, very cheap Chinese food, and you get it in bulk and abundance. And of course, they would have their restaurants placed in certain areas to attract a certain demographic that they know looking just for cheap food to feed quite a number of people and families. But now I see even the smaller restaurants have now become restaurants and bars. They're not even takeaways anymore. So now they're filtered into the liquor industry, and I'm not advocating or saying we don't need liquor stores and bars, but those small mom and pop bars were kind of reserved for, Bahamians who couldn't afford your 700 and all that stuff. So I'm saying they're moving into areas where even, Bahamians used to be able to get a license to operate a liquor store. But if you look now on any corner where there's a Chinese takeaway restaurant, it's now a restaurant and bar. Exactly. So it's like these licenses are being issued like like nobody is trying to reserve anything, whatever it is, whether it's liquor or any other kind of license, reserve it for Bahamians who are just trying to make their mark in our society.
I want to speak to that. I want to speak to that point. With respect to the Chinese, and I have to say it's them in particular, just as you guys are stating, we have, this is what Bahamian business people are facing. They are, and I would have said something similar to this last week, they are being put in a position where they are heavily, heavily, heavily regulated. The others or the other persons who come in from other nationalities and places, they are not under the burden of regulations, it seems. Absolutely. Certain things that you see them getting away with, Bahamian enterprises cannot get away with. We see these very same bar and restaurants that you're talking about. If you look at the back of the buildings, the shoddy way in which they're constructed, I guess it's their warehouse spaces or their sleeping quarters, etc.
All in one.
Yeah. You couldn't have a Bahamian enterprise doing that type of thing without falling under the pressures of regulators, health control and business. I mean, we don't know. It's just very difficult for, I think, Bahamians to maintain what is being asked of them, while the competitors who are from different, from foreign nations are not being held to the same standards. Yeah. And so therefore you see this movement of Bahamians being pressured out of their own environment. Exactly. Because they just cannot sustain the heavy burdens where others can get away.
And if you was to go somewhere away, it's completely opposite. The persons who are native to that place, the citizens, they would have the certain leeway to do certain things. And then if you were a foreigner, there'll be extra precautions placed upon you to operate or even obtain the license to begin with. It's usually backwards in most places, but here it's just simplified for persons who are foreign, and then persons who are Bahamian, it's just extra complicated for you to proceed.
Back to trusting and supporting your own. It's back to trusting and supporting your own.
Even with some businesses, we have some businesses here who, they won't offer something as simple as overtime to Bahamians, but a foreigner can get paid the overtime. That's just simple, stuff like that.
But I was going to say on Yvette's point too, with regard to local businesses. I have heard local businesses weren't able to meet their regulatory requirements. Police would come telling them that they're going to shut them down because they're not meeting whatever filings they had to put into Department of Inland Revenue. And police would visit them 2-3 times and tell me what happens on the 4th week. The Chinese moving. Like, seriously?
Exactly.
I am telling you, if we don't stand up, something is going on, because I don't understand why so many of them have licenses, like you say, in the over the hill neighborhood. And I can tell you, I watch them when I come home, and I watch them mornings when I go to work. These Bahamian young men, ages of 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, tell me even going to the 40-year-old. They are standing outside waiting for the Chinese man to open up the drink. Wow. You allowed none.
Exactly.
Do not marry.
I've observed the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So
if you don't take back your country, you won't be here. And all they will be doing is going to jail. Alcoholics, drug addicts, jail.
But it calls for all of us to look out for each other. You know, they will be able to do those things, I guess, and get ahead. But if we could stand up for each other, look out for each other. I know we can't depend on the politician, but we elect those politicians to stand up for us.
Yeah, but this is what we need to be lobbying for in the House right now. What about Saudi Arabia and any oil? That's not important to us as a people. We are losing our men. We are losing them. And
Definitely.
why so many Chinese have licenses? I bet you if one of you now get a liquor license to put in some over the hill, everybody will say you can't get it. But you don't know the Chinese getting their license for you to protest.
Yeah.
Okay. We finished with that one now. I'm looking to see what you all will do. I'm old and over the hill. I don't have the kind of energy.
So I'm approaching the hill, Miss Archer. I can see it.
Yeah, but I feel like we need to start, you know, from young, like teaching the people that the type of, like, you see the type of communities that you would see abroad. Like, say for example, the Chinese, they would have a community where they would help each other and support each other. I feel like we don't really have that here. Like, everyone's taught to, you know, do for you. Well, at least in Nassau, I see you're taught to do for yourself and don't really check for the other person, or sometimes even sabotage the other person. But it doesn't help as a whole. Like, we have to help each other. Yeah, but then again, I'm from Eleuthera, so
the masses of people are in the government school, and I think we need to bite the bullet, and we have to start out by changing the curriculum. I don't know what.
I grew up in the government school system, so
that is probably the first thing we need to look at, to change the curriculum, because not everyone is academically inclined. So we need to fix that so that we teach these young men trade. We need to fix even the business classes to teach them more practical business rather than textbook business.
And some of them are actually gifted. I know a little boy now, he's 15. He didn't know when BJCs were supposed to be taken. All he knows is the teachers give him a piece of paper and say, tell your ma you have to pay for this. So I asked him, did you study for these things? He say, no. No one told me to study nothing. I said, but you knew you had to take them? He said, yeah. But first thing I know which subjects I was taking is when she gave me the paper, and the exam is in 3 weeks. Well, what do you think? Why do you think the level is at H?
Yeah, and also too, what I've noticed, because I know I went to government schools. I've seen a lot of persons who have potential to say be knowledgeable on certain stuff. I feel like maybe I was a little bit more lucky, I guess, to progress in the subjects better, because my grandmother herself was an educator and I grew up with her. But I see in persons who've had potential to understand certain subject better, but the foundation was lacking. Like, I feel like they didn't really have that backing to really support them, but the potential was there. And certain stuff, like even like just hanging out with them and being able to explain certain things, they were able to even do better on their own. But not everybody has that foundation.
Yeah, because this boy, I think from like the age of 10, he used to be outside cooking on a grill. And he said to me, he said, I want to be a chef, or as far as I could go in cooking. But they're not teaching him that. They give him another paper. You have to get ready to take your next set of BJCs, and then you can get ready for BGCSE. But he wants to cook. What a waste of.
And I've had experience where, say with the math BGCSE, the teachers basically, because they don't want you to take it under saying you're their student, they don't want you to say, well, you fail or whatever. So they'll primarily say, oh, because, you know, the teachers sign off on whether you could do the core or extended.
Yeah.
So the teachers say, well, everyone's doing the core. But I had to literally fight to say, no, I want to do the extended because I feel like I could do the third paper. But she really didn't feel like anybody could do the extended. So she only was signing up for the core, and I had to fight for that. And eventually I was able to take that extended BGCSE, and I came up with the A. But you never know. Like a lot of times you also have, and I don't think it's primarily the teachers' fault, because, you know, teachers are really not supported like that in this country. I mean, a lot of places they're not supported like that. And I guess how things are situated with the school systems, especially the government school systems, they don't feel like a lot of persons can do it. But you also have some students who probably could do better, but they're not given the opportunity to.
Yes, I agree. So I put out lots of challenges there for you all, along with your colleagues, and I'm looking to see what the young people will do. Y'all have to do something, because we're really in a bad situation here. I just see us sinking and being in the minority quickly. And we have to take our country back. So you not only have to fight on the financial sector, but on the local domestic side, you have to fight too. And we're not fighting. So I hope to hear some good things when I read the paper. Writing some letters to the editor. That's the first start. Everybody going quiet now.
But Ms. Audra, I think first off too, we just, you know, every one person can't do everything, but you could just take like a small stance. Like for me, I do see what you guys are talking about with the Chinese and all of them taking over a lot of small businesses who can't sustain themselves anymore. But for me personally, I don't buy anything from them.
Okay.
Me either.
Yeah, I just don't buy anything from them.
That's my little small way. That's my little small way.
Yeah, I do it as well. I have a Bahamian company come and clean my yard. I just don't utilize their services.
But guess what? We are one and few, because the young people, like the little 14-year-old I was just telling you, he goes, instead of going to the mom and pop store, where does he go to buy his, what do you call it, his chip for his phone, whatever little small thing he wants? He goes to the Chinese. And he's telling me the Chinese is cheaper. I save $3. So you still getting cut out. The Bahamian people still getting cut out because those young people are already being conditioned to go to the Chinese. You understand what I mean? So yes, you and I would do that because we're being patriotic. But that patriotic is not in these young people. They're looking at the bottom line. Wherever they could save $1 or $2, that's what they will do. Yep. And I don't hear anybody, I'll tell you, even at UB, in terms of for this year, people going into this financial sector stream, they said that's a dying industry.
Well, I'm to some degree in that industry. So, but I do pair it with other services.
Yeah.
And I will say too that there is a high level of precaution with respect to any IBCs and foreign entities that may wish to, even those that want to incorporate along with, use the Companies Act companies to be a part of. I'm suspect with respect to even those interests when they want to, you know, pair with Bahamians to do this particular, and it's not that I am being xenophobic. It's just that you have to have a high level of due diligence.
Yeah, you have to.
Know? Yeah.
It's just the nature of the business and also of the landscape. You just have to be very cautious.
Yeah.
Very cautious.
And with respect to whether or not the industry is dying, certainly the offshore industry, to me, is like in intensive care with the IV on and the meds going through it, but I don't know if it could be revived.
No, I don't think revive at the cost of that. This is just a in history whereby it will be used to be.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They want to be here. Either they're intending to live here, or they vacation here, or they're those people that live on boats and they decide that this is where they spend the majority of their time. But this whole thing of keeping things offshore and hiding it, all of that will just disappear. Because you have to put that in context in terms of technology. Before, no one knew what was happening in other parts of the world. But now with the internet, everybody knows everything. If Putin sneezes, you know. You could actually know while he's still sneezing. But in the past, you would never know. By the time you get the news, might have been 1 month later, 2 months later, maybe a year later, but not in today's technology.
Sounds like you feeling more into the decentralization and the crypto as we discussed previous class.
But that's just the way things are moving.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how things are moving because we're still using the centralized system, but decentralization based on crypto and NFTs and those, it kind of moves back away from that as well. See how things goes back into a circle.
Mm-hmm. But that's what I'm telling you.
I have a question. Is it Joylyn? Excuse me, Ms. Archer. Is it Joylyn, the cryptocurrency person?
Yes, I think so.
It's Joylyn.
Oh, I'm not an expert at cryptocurrency at all. I would like to know more about it. But what I've seen is that there are some large countries that are stopping use of cryptocurrency, like Russia and China. What is the story on that?
Well, I mean, I don't know the story on that, but I don't see how they could really stop it, considering that it's a global thing and it's not centralized particularly to one country. So even like there's such a thing as VPN and proxy, like you can always.
So I understand they're blocking the dark web. They're stopping the transactions even on the dark web. So I mean, I don't know.
I don't know how they're able to do that.
Yeah, I just looked at an article the other day. Before, when you were talking about it last week, I wanted to ask you what was your take on it.
I mean, my take on it,
I don't know a lot about it at all, but
I'm not sure how they're able to do that because usually when you use the VPN, those, and especially a proxy, that would take you to be represented in a whole other jurisdiction. So if you're on that, the government shouldn't really be able to especially access you because 1, you would be hidden. 2, you should be protected from anybody trying to access your system. And if you have your digital assets in another jurisdiction, how are they able to affect that? And how are they even able to know unless you're not really using a real protected VPN? So
okay,
like the state for the country to be able to stop that, I don't know how, unless they mean stop from use of like claiming with it or like spending with it within the country, but you could always use it outside. And then once you use it outside, you could cash it out there and have it sent to your local accounts. Like I feel like there's always a way around that. I don't see how they could really stop that.
Okay, I found the article by Reuters. It says, Russia may ban crypto mining and investment amid fears that it could compromise financial stability in the country. In a report published on the 20th of January, Russia's central bank proposed a ban on the use and mining of crypto in the country as it has the potential to cause bubbles in the market. Russia has long feared the prevalence of crypto could exacerbate criminal activity such as money laundering or the financing of terrorism. The new proposals would bring in a blanket ban, including crypto exchanges. And so it would follow follow China.
You quit.
China has a ban on it also. Yeah.
You found
So
that
I guess
quickly.
they're probably banning the tags
Online.
to the country and its use of it there, and probably the coin being grown there or whatever. But persons who are in Russia can possibly still partake in it, but just outside of
the
Russia.
jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Okay, that clears it up. Using this VPN thing.
Yeah, VPN proxy.
Well, it'll take you into a different locale, a different jurisdiction.
Yes.
Even like some persons, a lot of persons in Bahamas use it too, like even just to watch certain stuff on Netflix that are blocked from the Bahamas.
Yeah. I think my husband has that.
Oh my God! All these people doing illegal things. Let me carry on.
It's not illegal.
It's not illegal.
Yeah.
It's not
but
illegal.
You know there are. Go ahead. You know there are hackers who can tell you where you're using these things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They could find out.
So I presume that places like Russia and China could definitely find out when their citizens are using the VPN to go elsewhere over the web. Yeah.
But even
and there are also certain websites that are invite only. So once you invite it in, you can be able to have access to certain informations online.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, you know, China started their chip process. They started it with the peasants. I don't know how far they are now. I didn't keep track on it. Where they would put the chip inside so they'll know wherever their citizens are. So that's technology.
I hope that don't spread over.
Hey, they're here.
I'm against chipping.
They are here. So I won't be surprised. You know the people that govern us, they gang on anything.
Yeah.
They put chips on and we don't even know.
Well, according to some people, that's what the COVID vaccine is all about. So who knows?
No, it is not
already.
I don't think so. Anyhow, that was good conversation. Now you can see, even looking at everything we've discussed so far in terms of companies, IBC or CAC, there's a lot of things, a lot of movements and changes. And I'm glad that the conversation awakened us as to what is happening in our own community and internationally. And as you can see, this topic is one where, on a daily basis, there's always something going on somewhere around the world that impacts us because we have so many international clients. So good conversation. All right, so let's move on now.
Before we
Go ahead.
move on, I just checked the chat. Sharia Sands also made a note that we need to move to solar energy, and I agree with her. However, I know before you had mentioned why they were investing in oil. I think they also too why they want to invest in that, because I think they use the oil to create power here, but it was proposed before that persons were saying, why don't BPL those try and use more solar energy, since we're a very sunny place and we could always get energy from the sun. But I know another issue why they don't want to do that is because they feel like there's more money in using the oil rather than the natural resource, which is the
money
sun.
For who?
I know, for them. They're not thinking of everyone. But they can make money still using the sun. But I agree. I feel like we should, because sometimes there's even so much energy that we consume from this hot sun that the Bahamas gets sometimes. Like sometimes even I think the persons who have solar powered homes, I think the clock on the meter, it goes backwards and all, where they get so much energy back. And I know in the US and certain places, when persons have solar homes and they get so much energy back, it helps to supply the power companies locally, and then they get monies back.
That's how it works.
BPL don't want to do that.
But
I think they do it here.
They don't want to do that.
Yeah, it goes back into the grid.
Yeah.
But
over here, if you have solar homes, and even if you have so much energy that it goes back, they still charge you and say that they have a minimum charge to charge you still, even if you're not using their power. And you have to still be connected to them, even if you decide that you want to use like say you get a new home and you want it to be solar, you still have to have BPL connected to them, and they have to charge you a minimum fee.
Minimum fee. I hope it's 20.
Yeah, so that's something that I feel like the government would probably have to try and discuss, because I think BPL is private now.
Yeah, but who brings in the oil?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I feel like that's something that they need to try and, you know, I guess discuss with them on, because it would be so much better, because we get so much sun so many days of the week. We even have sun on Christmas Day. When I go to Luther on Christmas Day, we go to the beach. So yeah. Like solar would be so much better. It would be easier for homes to afford it. It would be you know, we wouldn't really have to really bother with the oil and such like that. But yeah, that's something that they need to try and really
One more precautionary note, and it may seem to be averse to everything that everyone here would have said, but with although I agree heavily that we need to find ways of reducing overhead for businesses and for individuals, we also have to consider the fact that if we began moving away from paying for utilities, that's going to diminish the cash flow within our nation, thereby bringing about inflation and other crazy things with respect to cash flow. So these things all have to be planned out very strategically. Well,
we agree.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yes, we want to reduce costs on power and city water and all of these other things, but those things have to be worked out of the system strategically. And yeah, with the grid and BPL, anticipating that people are moving ahead with getting solar power and having to have a minimum cost, all of that is intended to just keep things viable. So, I mean, we may want one thing, but we also have to be careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's just a precautionary point.
I agree with you. I will end this conversation by telling you all, I don't know how to send it to you, but when China embarked on its whole change and its economic structure, it did it based on a plan. Everything you see China's doing now is based on a plan, and it didn't happen overnight. I read one volume already, and if you read it, you will see what it is to plan a country and a people for the future.
Well, that's part of our problem.
That's part of our problem.
We need a strategic plan, but part of the problem is that every 5 years we change a government. And so the planning is never continuous, because as soon as the next party comes in, all of the plans that the first party had almost gets thrown out of the thing. But if our government embark on creating a strategic plan for this country and I guess mandating a body to carry out that plan, we might be a little bit better. If you look at what the central bank is trying to do, and that has a lot to do with the cash flow situation, they're trying to, their strategic plan is to do away with the check and the cash flow in the country. And so they have a strategic plan that by 2025, I think it is 22 or 25, we won't be using cash anymore. And that's why they created what they call the Sand Dollar Project. But I think that they probably need to do a little bit more with putting out the information, to educating the general populace on what that strategic plan is. But by next year, we probably won't be able to use or having checkbooks and writing checks will be a thing of the past. And what that does to the commercial banks is that, you know, our revenue generating from checks is going to be no more.
Yeah.
You know, so, but they have a strategic plan with the central bank. Our government now needs to work on a strategic plan and setting up a body that will ensure that that plan is carried out, regardless of the party that's in power.
Exactly. A governance body that will deal with making sure that the strategy is implemented. So no matter who sits in the chair as prime minister, ensures that we go ahead with the strategy because the strategy is already laid out. But trust me, after class, I'll get the name of the book so Miguel can share it with you. And if you wish, you could order it from Amazon. And there's also a video on YouTube, a very short clip, if I could find it. I'll also share that. You can watch it from there first. And then if you're interested, you could read the book on how to strategically position your country to succeed.
Okay, I'm interested, so I'll be looking out for the email.
Okay, all right. I'll get it for you. It's good reading. All right. So that's why you see the Chinese come here and they know what they're doing. They know how, they know.
Could you please, Ms. Archer?
Uh-huh.
Could you please also send that to the Prime Minister? Thank you.
It depends whether or not the person vision to want to move their people forward. That's the strategy. The first thing, you must have it in your mind that you want your people to move ahead. What is it that you want for your people? And I'm not talking about decreasing VAT for bread basket items because that's not moving us forward.
So I don't seem one-sided. Let me also say, send it to the previous Prime Minister as well. Thank you. Well, his
and the future one to come.
And the future one to come.
Oh, anyhow.
Just some levity, just some levity.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see.
All right.
All right. So for nominee shareholder services, of course, you know, to be a nominee shareholder, you have to be licensed. So you get a nominee license from the Central Bank of the Bahamas to provide that service. And then I have the capital that's required. And like we said before, once you're in this nominee arrangement, if the ultimate beneficial owner dies, of course, you know, the shares would devolve to the personal representative. So now let's talk about the shareholders' rights. Oh, that is a wonderful discussion today to write a final exam question. It's coming to me. Moving on. No one heard that, hey? No.
Yeah,
I heard it.
I heard it.
All right. So shareholders may have rights, privileges, and powers, and those are specified in the shareholders agreement. They may also be included in the articles of association, because in the articles of association, you'll see reduction of capital, alteration of articles of association, transfer of shares, etc. The general law may protect shareholders of private companies from fraud, illegality, or the unfairly prejudicial conduct of the company's affairs, but it cannot protect them from the consequences of dissension within the company between its directors or members, or because it's not the function of the courts to review the merits of business decisions taken by the board of directors or shareholders. So some of the relevant corporate documents to shareholders' rights are the Articles of Association, the Shareholders Agreement, the Nominee Shareholders Agreement, the Declaration of Trust, the Register of Members, Resolution of Members, common law, and of course, legislation. So the Shareholders Agreement, what is it? And I also sent you a nice document from a law firm on Shareholders Agreement. You got it, right? I think Miguel sent it to you. It's called...
Yeah, something
Yeah,
from
we got it.
We got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, please read it. Yeah, it's a good...
this morning.
Okay, it's a good document to read it. So I've just summarized it in here. It's a contract between the shareholders of a company in which they agree how the company should be run. The shareholders normally agree to use their voting power in the company to ensure that the terms of the shareholders agreement are complied with. And it binds each member to the other by the provisions outlined. The shareholders agreement may not suit all circumstances, but they should normally be considered when there are 2 to 20 shareholders in a company. The agreement is to protect all the parties against a majority of shareholders using their voting powers to the detriment of the other shareholders. Without a shareholders agreement, a company would normally be under the control of those who hold a majority of the votes at directors and shareholders meetings. A shareholders agreement can specify which decisions require all or certain shareholders to agree. And I could tell you that if you have two persons who incorporate a CAC company, then they then decide that they disagree. One person wants to take the company in this direction and the other in another direction. And if there is no shareholders agreement, what do you think will happen? No shareholders agreement. And both shareholders want to take the company in a different direction.
They'd more than likely end up splitting. I mean, if they can't come to a mutual understanding, maybe they'll end up going their separate ways or
indecision, especially if they're equal in share ownership. It's an indecision and it's a lot of deadlock.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way of making a decision.
Exactly. So what happens to the company?
Dissolve.
If it is an
or it's stifled, it may remain in operation but be stifled.
Exactly.
From any growth.
Right. It remains in operations and it is stifled from any growth. And then what happens is one shareholder wants to sue the other shareholder, and it depends on what the board now, who has the responsibility to manage the company, which direction are they going to take it in? Are they going with A or are they going with B? Or are they going in what's in the best interest of the company as a whole?
They needed to have a strategic plan, like you pointed out, like countries should. But if they had a strategic objective, then the board will continue in that direction. Those things happen all the time.
Yes. And so that's why having a shareholders agreement is so important. It's really important to have one. And a lot of people, when they form a company, do not draft a shareholders agreement. Because they're saying we're best friends. We know what we'll do. We'll come with a decision. But life doesn't work that way all the time. So some provisions that should be in a shareholders agreement are require the consent to be obtained from all or specified majority of the shareholders to appoint or remove directors, payment of salaries or fees to shareholders, and extend company loans. They could outline which management decisions may be made by directors and which must be referred and determined by the shareholders, acceptable company borrowing limits, approval process for directors obtaining consent to be involved in a project or business venture, which may conflict with his duty as a director, or circumstances in which the shareholders may approve contracts, hiring practices, or the commencement of legal proceedings. So like I said, it's very difficult when there is a disagreement between the shareholders and there is no shareholder agreement. So shareholders and directors have two completely different roles. The shareholders own the company, and of course, the directors manage the company. And unless the articles specify, a director does not need to be a shareholder, and a shareholder has no right to be a director of a company. It's important to make a distinction between shareholders and directors, not only to determine who owns and manages a company, but also to determine who can make decisions regarding the company in a directors meeting, shareholders meeting, or general meeting of a company. Some decisions may be made by the directors, but only with the shareholders' consent. The articles of association of a company normally specify the requisite number of shareholders and directors, which issues regarding the company may be made by shareholders or directors, what meetings may be called and organized by shareholders and directors, how the shareholders and directors may vote and participate in different meetings, and what powers do shareholders and directors have in the ownership and management of the company. The relationship between shareholders and directors is a complex one. The directors are subject to the general fiduciary duty to act in the company's best interests. They are required to account to the shareholders for the preservation and profitability of the assets of the company. Although directors are responsible for the daily operation of the company and to make certain key decisions which may affect the company, the shareholders normally have the ultimate source of power, as they may have certain powers to appoint and remove directors or give their consent to major decisions. Now, when it comes to dividends, ordinary shareholders may be paid a dividend in respect of their common ordinary shares only after all preference dividends have been paid to date. If the preference shares by their terms of issue have priority for repayment of capital in the winding up or on the reduction of capital, only after the preference capital have been fully repaid. Shareholders of preference shares rank in priority to shareholders of common ordinary shares. Debentures, debenture stocks, loan stock and notes, and preference shares are known to an ordinary shareholder as prior charges, which are securities which will absorb a fixed amount of the company's income and a fixed amount of assets before he has any entitlement. Ordinary shares are also known as equities or risk capital. Although payment of dividend of shares held by ordinary shareholders is postponed or subordinate to payment of dividends for shares held by preference shareholders, and although they bear the risk of the company's profits and assets proving insufficient, there are some advantages for an ordinary shareholder. First one is where the preference dividend is fixed and cannot be increased however large the company's profits. The whole of the residual profits of the company after paying the preference dividend paid up as dividend to the ordinary shareholders. In the winding up liquidation, when preference shares with priority for repayment of capital are being repaid, the nominal value of their shares, unless the preference shareholders are expressly entitled to participate in the surplus assets, the whole of the remaining assets of the company will be distributed amongst the ordinary shareholders. The ordinary shareholders may be able to receive back the nominal value of their shares several times over. Most of the voting power at general meetings belong to the ordinary shareholders, and it is they who will control the affairs of the company and appoint new directors. Due to the greater risk he assumes, the ordinary shareholders expect to receive a higher rate of dividend on his shares than is paid to the preference shareholders. So when the company is used profitably, the profits earned by the company should be more than sufficient to pay the fixed interest or dividend on their securities, and the excess profits will go to the fund out of which dividends on the ordinary shares are paid. The volatility of ordinary shares make them known as risk capital. The higher the ratio of loan and preference capital to the ordinary share capital of the company, the greater are the ordinary shareholders' expectations of high dividends when the company prospers. Conversely, the greater the risk of ordinary shareholder receiving no dividend or incurring a loss on their shares when the company experiences some adversity or hardship. So you agree with me that this chapter 6 is an examinable area in all aspects. Agreed?
Yeah.
You would mean, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Agreed.
Okay, then let's talk about company management. So companies are owned by the shareholders. They are managed by the directors. And the directors are responsible for carrying out the strategic vision, mandate, and corporate goals of the company. So a director is appointed by the shareholders, and they have the responsibility to manage the company and also ensure that they achieve the corporate goals and discharge their responsibility to its stakeholders. And you know, the stakeholders are referring not just to the owners, but also to third party and its employees. So the word director is not defined in the act, only the word officer. So, however, both acts do legislatively reinforce the general fiduciary duties of a director to manage the company, act honestly in good faith, and in the best interest of the company, subject to the unanimous shareholders agreement and to the memo and arts. Directors are required to exercise the duty of care, diligence, skill that a reasonably prudent man would exercise in such a position, whether he is an executive director or a non-executive director. As fiduciary, directors have a legal duty to act in good faith, not to make a profit from his fiduciary position, not place themselves in a position where their duties as directors conflict with their interests, act for their own benefit or the benefit of others without clear, unequivocal consent from the principals of the company on whose behalf they act. Act in accordance with the memorandum and articles of association of the company and deal with and treat fairly the different classes of shareholders. The first directors of a company are appointed at incorporation by the subscribers to the memo and arts. Subsequent appointments are governed by and carried out in accordance with the Articles of Association. The shareholders' agreement should also be reviewed and the relevant provisions of the shareholder agreement applied as necessary. The articles normally specify when and how a board may fill a vacancy for a director, appoint additional directors up to a maximum number, or remove a director. On appointment, a new director should sign to signify his or her consent to act as a director, execute a director's service agreement, obtain the relevant insurances and indemnities, and receive a copy of the corporate documents. And that's normally done by the corporate secretary. So that would include the memo and arts, a copy of the latest financial statements, the board minutes, any statutory filing requirements, listing of all of the policies that were approved by the board. And nowadays, all of these are done electronically on a, what they call it, a digital board platform. So an executive director is different from a non-executive director. Executive director works full-time. He's responsible for the daily operations, strategic planning, management, and business development. The non-executive does not work full-time, but attends board meetings and gives advice to the board of directors. There's no legal distinction between executive and non-executive directors. They have the same legal duties, responsibilities, and legal liabilities. So in addition to the executive and non-executive directors, you also have nominee directors who are personal or corporate directors appointed to act as directors on behalf of another person or entity. And that's normally done through a corporate management agreement or a nominee director agreement. And you have shadow directors. And these are persons who, by operation of law and their conduct in relation to the management and decision-making of the company, are considered directors and may be liable as directors, even though they may not have been formally appointed as directors. And they may act in a different capacity or role in relation to the company. So shadow directors are recognized in Bahamian law under the Companies Winding Up Amendment Act 2011, and also under the IBC Winding Up Amendment Act. So it is defined as any person in association with whose direction or instructions the directors of the company are accustomed to act, but the person is not deemed to be a shadow director by reason only that the directors act on advice given by him in a professional capacity. So if a person or entity is considered to be a shadow director, he is liable for all legal obligations and liabilities of a director, duly appointed or acting in the traditional sense. In the English cases, they have indicated that the test as to whether a person or entity has real influence in the corporate affairs of a company to be deemed a shadow director is whether that real influence was wielded over the corporate governance of the company by the person or entity identified as such a director, particularly if it can be shown that he acted on equal footing with the duly appointed or formal directors of the company. The recognition and judicial treatment of shadow directors under English common law and Bahamian legislation is to protect the stakeholders of a company from the management of companies by unelected or non-appointed persons or persons. So directors, they act as fiduciaries of the shareholder, for the shareholders, and custodians of his assets. So therefore, certain legal and statutory duties are imposed on them. Those duties are to act in good faith, to promote the success of the company. They act in accordance with the company's constitution. They act in the best interest of the company. They exercise reasonable skill, care, and diligence. They exercise independent judgment. They avoid conflicts of interest. They manage the company, and they treat different classes of shareholders fairly. So directors normally have exclusive power to manage the business of the company. And the advantage of a director or a board of director is both in their concentrated expertise, relative independence from the company's various stakeholders, and the efficiency of centralized decision-making. The disadvantage is that the directors may manage the company in their own interests rather than in the interests of those they are supposed to serve. So you could ask yourself the question, how do you deal with this? One is you can always give the members or the shareholders more power. Two, you can insert a governance arrangement within the board of directors with procedures in the decision-making process itself. Or third, with the various agency problems arising from centralized decision-making is one of the most familiar to lawyers. Legal duties are imposed on directors which set limits within which they must exercise their powers. So again, duties dealing with the exercise of directors' powers are the duty to act within their powers, the duty to promote the success of the company, and the duty to exercise independent judgment. So to whom are these general duties owed, and who are their beneficiaries? In common law, the duties of directors is owed to the company. Only those who are able to act as or on behalf of the company can enforce the duties. In Peskin and Anderson, they distinguish between fiduciary duties owed by directors is to the company, which arises out of the relationship between director and company, and fiduciary duties owed to shareholders, which are dependent upon establishing a special factual relationship. So by whom are the general duties owed? Those who have been properly appointed as directors of the company. These are also shadow directors. In the case of Reese Smith and Forsyth, directors must act in the best interest of the company and cannot use their powers to benefit themselves or third parties. The legal test as to whether directors acted in good faith is one in which a director acts in what he believes to be in the best interest of the company, notwithstanding the fact that his decision may in fact also promote his own interests. It is the duty of directors to exercise their powers for a proper purpose, that courts fairly and objectively monitor and assess the propriety of the decisions and action of the company directors. And this is so particularly since the notion of what is actually in the best interest of the company is more a subjective test and arguably more suitably determined by the judgment of directors who operate and manage their companies within the perimeters of proper and appropriate ethical behavior. Directors must be seen to be exercising their discretionary powers independently and fairly in all matters, particularly those involving their shareholders and in contractual relationships with external and internal parties. So while the case in Motivix versus Bullfield established that directors do not have a duty not to place themselves in a position of conflict, in and of themselves, they should not place themselves in a position where their personal interests or duties to third parties conflict with their duties to the company for which they are acting as directors, without the clear, unequivocal consent of the company. Directors may be given such consent to the provisions of the Articles of Association of the company or by an ordinary resolution of the company. As a corollary to the principle under which the conflict of interests of directors operate, directors are also prohibited from gaining a profit or obtaining some benefit by using proprietary information, trade secrets, or opportunities that may belong to or derive from the company for which they act as directors. Under the Act, Companies Act and the IBC Act, they stipulate the duty of directors to manage the business and affairs of the company, subject always to the limitation or the restrictions within the memo and arts and the shareholders agreement. So in the case of mutual life versus rank organization, it is imperative that the shareholders of the company, as one of the primary stakeholders within the corporate governance regime, be treated fairly in the proper distribution of dividends. Where applicable, the allotment of shares, access to company information, and in corporate decisions made in accordance with the company's memo and arts. So since directors are generally responsible for the management of the company, they may exercise all the powers of the company. However, directors do not have unlimited powers to run a company on behalf of the shareholders. They can only exercise the powers granted to them either by general law or by the Articles of Association or the shareholders agreement. The ambit of a director's authority is restricted by the Companies Act or the IBC Act and the Articles of Association. The Articles of Association usually entitle the board to delegate powers to individual directors as considered appropriate. However, directors act collectively as a board to bind the company. So any breach of any one of the duties will amount to a breach of a director's duty to the company. As a rule, a director cannot be liable for the fraudulent, criminal, or bad faith acts of his co-directors if he has not taken part in such acts and has no knowledge or suspicion of them. However, if he is involved in such acts, he is jointly and severally liable with his co-directors and may be required by law to make good the whole loss with a contribution from his co-directors, except when monies were misappropriated for his sole benefit, where there would be no contribution by his co-directors. Directors may be liable to account for any secret profits he may have made in such a case. The company may be entitled to void any contract it may have made with him. Additionally, any company property that the director may have taken or transferred to a third party may be recovered by the company, except in the instance of a third party, the property was taken in good faith and for value. It should be noted that under the common law principle enunciated in the case of Bramford and Bramford, the company may, by ordinary resolution, waive a breach of duty by a director. Additionally, the court has the power to grant relief to a director who has acted honestly and reasonably, and who, in review of the facts of the case, ought to, in the circumstances, be exonerated. Many directors seek protection from liability and risk exposure from their companies and its insurers within the legal limitations imposed by statutory and common law. In granting such protection particularly in instances involving impropriety, bad faith, or a clear and unconscionable breach of director's duty. So under Section 118 of the Companies Act and Section 58 of the IBC Act, they allow a director and his legal representatives to be indemnified by the company against all costs, charges, and expenses which may reasonably be incurred by him in respect of any civil, criminal, or administrative action or proceedings to which he is made a party by reason of being or having been a director of that company. The statutory right to indemnification is only permissible to directors and their legal representatives of both CAC and IBCs, provided those directors acted honestly and in good faith and in the best interest of the company, and where they had reasonable grounds for believing that their conduct was lawful in the case of a criminal or administrative action or proceedings involving a Companies Act company that is enforced by a monetary penalty. Since directors and officers may be personally liable to any party that may have an interest in the affairs of the company for damages, legal costs and expenses in relation to a breach of director's duty, many of them seek the protection of directors and officers' liability insurance. Directors and officers' insurance are designed to protect a director or officer against claims that may be made by a company, shareholders, or creditors. So under Section 122 of the Companies Act or Section 58 of the IBC Act, they allow a company incorporated under those acts to purchase and maintain insurance for a director, registered agent, officer, or liquidator against liability incurred in such persons acting in the capacity as a director, registered agent, officer, or liquidator. Notwithstanding the provisions of direct and protection of directors and officers liability insurance, it is important that executives and non-executive directors ensure that they are properly and sufficiently covered when agreeing to accept and act in the capacity as a director of a company. Careful examination should not only be made of the coverage involved, but the extent of such coverage and the incidences and risks that have been included and excluded under such coverage. Prospective and newly appointed directors would be advised to seek an independent advice and review of the indemnification and insurance coverage offered by their companies, and extent of their personal protection against claims, actions, and proceedings for litigious issues involving the company. Since directors and officers cannot rely for protection on the separate legal personality of their companies, as enunciated in Solomon versus Solomon, and protection is provided for the company's assets in respect of reimbursement of directors and officers, indemnification and insurance coverage should be a primary consideration in the exhaustive list of requirements of a company before accepting to act as a director. Increasing number of claims of shareholder and creditor litigants, rising costs of litigation, and the personal assets of directors, they may be at risk. Should encourage companies, directors, and their relevant advisors to work collaboratively with audit and corporate governance committees to ensure not only compliance with internal legal and regulatory requirements, but also sufficiently comprehensive legal and financial protection, particularly for directors and officers who maintain the gatekeeping role, risk, and responsibility of the company. Officers, their general statutory duties do not apply to managers who are not directors of the company. Note that when applying the law relating to directors' duties, the courts do not distinguish between the actions of the director as director and actions as manager, where the director is an executive. Those duties will apply to both aspects of the director's activities. So therefore, some actions by senior managers of the company, provided they are also directors, will be subject to the controls of general statute. So in addition to company directors, Officers carry out the operational and daily mandate and activities of the company and oversee the supervision of critical corporate duties and responsibilities. Such officers are normally answerable to the board of directors of the company. And so what I've listed after here is just the sections that speak to directors and then the standard of care under both the CAC and the IBC. So the fiduciary role, the duties and responsibilities of directors and officers in the management of companies are significant and pervasive. The challenges of good corporate governance, increasing shareholder rights, improper actions by directors, and the pervasive legal liabilities of risk exposure to directors for the performance and propriety of companies make it more challenging for directors to clearly define their roles in the ever-changing environment of modern-day commerce. A recent case law has reflected the ambit of directors' fiduciary duties extend also to shareholders, creditors, employees of companies, making the expectation, responsibilities, and accountability of directors that much greater and more demanding. These duties are important reminders to directors of their need to be prudent, proactive, and precautionary in their roles as executive or non-executive directors whose decisions and actions are increasingly under scrutiny by their stakeholders, courts, and the public at large. Any comments on the role of directors and officers and the risk that is involved in carrying out those positions? Anyone in the class is currently a director or officer?
Yes.
What do you think about your liability? Have you checked the insurance coverage?
I've checked the insurance coverage, and I also ensure that at the annual general meeting, there's that resolution that says that all of the acts and all of the actions over the course of the past fiscal year up to current date have been approved by all shareholders, members, and also that there is always a proper board pack that's circulated whenever there's a decision to be made. So okay. I try as best as I can, but you know, the way things work.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Also be mindful to limit the amount of approvals that come round robin, because it tends to take away from the actual quarterly meeting. A lot of managers try to send things round robin, saying things are urgent. Yeah. To circulate that actual deliberation by the board to get the full context of what is actually happening. So also be cautious of that.
Right. And also too, the articles that speak to, well, in certain articles that speak to prohibited acts and
exactly.
Yeah, to be sure that you're aware of them. So yeah.
And that's the role of corporate secretary also. And certain things are being tabled to make sure that the directors are mindful of certain provisions within the act, because they are the ones who guide the chairman. And they have access to the articles, and they're there to make sure that everything that is done is lawfully done.
And I mean, I have the benefit of being officer and director of both publicly listed and private company, right?
Yes.
And they are two, although they should look the same, they are two totally different animals. Yes. And so yeah. One definitely requires a high level of due diligence.
Mm-hmm. Because that's thoroughly.
Yeah.
Yes.
You could really go to jail, in other words.
Yes, you can. And
you can go to jail.
And in the private one, you can really be sued.
Yes.
Yes. So one is jail and one is lawsuit. I mean, both will have lawsuit, but
one for sure is jail.
One for sure is jail. And one for sure is lawsuit. if you don't carry out what you're supposed to do as a director.
Absolutely. And sometimes you wonder if it's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot. It is a lot of work. And I'd say being a director, one way you can enhance your position and make sure that you're doing what you should do, being mindful of the articles and company law was required. You can read Harvard Business Review that speaks about acting in a role as a manager or a director, what is expected from you from international best practices.
Yeah, another thing I think is helpful to directors, especially for people who are not from a legal background or have legal access, there should always be an onboarding by the secretary of the board of directors, and as well meetings, trainings, and tutorials for board of directors and officers.
Yes. That's always required. And remember how I mentioned earlier that the company secretary should provide what we call a director's handbook. And that director's handbook will be a part of the training for when they are onboarded.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hi. I noticed that Sharia had her hands up for a while.
I
see she have a question in the chat as well.
Okay, Sharia. The line disappeared.
Oh, okay. But I noticed she had she said her mic isn't working.
Oh, okay.
But I know I guess I'll ask her question for her while she, I guess, types her next question. But she asked if another company can be a shareholder in a company. I think so. Yeah. But I'll let you answer.
Yes. You can have a company that is a shareholder of another company. That's exactly what I was saying when what the EU is looking at. That's the structure that we have here in the Bahamas, where we have the actual ultimate beneficial owner. He signs a nominee agreement. So when you read the annual statement, you'll see shareholding held by ABC company, 50 shares. Then you'll see 25 shares held by CIB company. And that's what they're looking at. They want the name of the actual living person on those returns and not companies.
Ms. Archer, is the exception to that when there's an NPO cannot own shares in a profit company, for-profit company?
No, it should not be.
Okay, so that's the exception.
Yes.
Which is never ever spoken of, but it is an exception.
Yeah.
It isn't spoken of, right? There's nowhere in legislation that even addresses that. It's just that nonprofits are not intended to make a profit. So you cannot expect to be a nonprofit owning shares in a profit entity for profit.
Exactly. Yeah. It just falls against the grain of what it is. So it won't be written. It is just known in law that it doesn't make any sense.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Sharia had another question?
No, she said it was just that one question she had.
Okay, all right. Kadrin, you have any questions? Because I didn't hear much from Kadrin today. Don't look so.
No, I don't, Ms. Archer.
All right. So I will send homework. I think we had a good class today. I wish we were in.
I have a question, Ms. Archer.
Go ahead.
I know that most directors receive directors' fees, but I saw some mention that the director should not get any type of profit. How does the fee not be considered profit?
You mean the director's fees?
Yeah.
The direct fees are normally done cross-border. So normally what they do, if you're in the banking industry, they would normally look to see what their competitors. They normally don't go outside of that. So it's really, even though it's called a director's fee, to me, those sums look like stipends for the amount of work.
They are, it's only 2 cents. It's only 2 cents and it's not for profit. It's like a stipend, yeah.
Stipend, it's a stipend. Because if you look at all of the responsibilities, what I just finished reading to you all, and what is involved in running and managing a company is really just a stipend. But it is an awesome responsibility for the amount that they are paid. Even though you may say it only happens once a quarter, that pressure that is on you when you have that quarterly meeting and what you have to do and understand and the obligations that come with when you vote, yes, we approve this, it's that stipend that doesn't equate to that. It just doesn't. It's not a hell of a lot of money. Trust me, it's very small.
That doesn't depend on the institution?
Yeah, but like I say, they normally do it across. I mean, I could be corrected, but I don't know of companies that go outside of what's normally paid.
No, and normally the shareholders would be privy to that and they would address that, speak to it, right? And secondly, you're looking at persons who are typically from their expertise and the work that they actually do in their daily lives is at a very high level, usually, because I've seen some directors now appointed from where, everywhere.
Yeah.
But what is typical is that you have an expert on your board of directors, and those persons are required to assist with the strategic direction of an entire entity.
Right.
And so the larger the entity, sorry.
Go ahead. No,
I was just about to say, just highlighting what you said, the larger the entity, the higher the risk. And, and responsibility. But those are just nominal fees, like you stated correctly, that appear almost like a stipend that will only probably give you the gas money and your laundry money to launder your suit. But
but your reliance as a board comes from knowing that your management team also have the expertise.
Absolutely, definitely.
Yeah, critical that you have a good management team. And if you're talking about the board itself and the composition of the board, it depends on the organization. So no matter what business or industry you're in, the composition of your board then looks at your strategic direction, and the board members are selected in that regard. So if it's an engineering company, you will have someone on there who knows engineering in general in terms, and then you have someone who knows about environmental, someone who knows about sustainability. You'll have a financial person on, and you'll also have a legal person on there. That's what we're talking about now, having that expertise. And so when they sit to the table with their expertise, and they're expected to contribute based on their expertise. And then collectively, they share that knowledge and come to a decision. But they're not paid for their experience and their expertise. It's a stipend. Yeah. Okay. So I would say good class today again. We did very well.
Yes, agreed, very much so.
Yes, it was a great class today. Very engaging.
Okay, all right. So have a great weekend. I will send the homework. I will start typing. Don't worry, it won't be difficult.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Miss Archer, I'm sorry if you spoke about this before I joined. I sent you an email asking whether the capstone was sent already. I got the midterm exam.
You didn't get the capstone?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
He did send it out though. I got it. So maybe others didn't.
Was it the same day as the midterm?
He sent it out I think that came out last week. When he thought he had sent out the homework for this week, I think he sent out the capstone instead. It's 5 questions, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And would the heading be capstone? Because I checked them.
It's a Word document, and it's the top of it is labeled capstone.
Okay, no, I didn't get that one, but I'll
if not, send an email.
I don't think the email is labeled capstone, but the inside, the attachment is.
Okay. I'll check again, and then I'll check, because I think he sends it just in the whole broadcast list. Yeah.
Yes, he did. Yes.
Okay, I'll double check again.
I'll double check. Just send him a quick email.
Okay, will do.
Okay. All right. So look out for homework now.
Will do.
So I'll probably, if you don't mind, I'll probably just use the broad email. Or you want me to let him send it separately? I'll let him send it separately, say homework, so no one misses it. I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. You're most welcome. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Read over again if you haven't read it, and look out for your homework.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Have a
Bye,
good weekend. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Have a good weekend.
Good luck on
Yes,
the
you too.
midterm.
Yeah, you just had to plug that in there. Okay, bye.